Grand Bellmore Hotel stood like a decaying monument against the Philadelphia skyline, its Gothic spires piercing the October fog. Built in 1892, it had weathered Prohibition, 2 world wars, and countless renovations. Yet one thing remained constant. Room 873 was never to be opened. Marcus Chen had been the night manager for exactly 3 weeks when he first heard about the room. During his training, he'd noticed the peculiarity in the hotel's ledger rooms 871, 872, then an unexplained jump to 874. When he'd asked about it, his supervisor had given him a strange look and changed the subject. The floor plan on the computer system showed the same gap, as if the room had been digitally erased from existence. It wasn't until his first solo night shift that he understood why the veteran staff avoided the 8th floor after midnight. The elevator seemed to linger longer on that floor, the doors hesitating before closing. The hallway lights flickered with a rhythm that felt almost purposeful. And there was something about the air, thick and still, like the inside of a long-sealed tomb. Dolers, the head of housekeeping who'd worked there for 40 years, was the first to give him a real warning. She'd found him examining the floor plan one quiet Tuesday night, tracing his finger along the missing room number. "Some things," she said in her heavily accented English, "are better left alone, Mijo." That room, she crossed herself and muttered something in Spanish that sounded like a prayer. "We don't clean there, we don't go there, and neither should you." It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when the first call came. Marcus was reconciling the night's receipts when the desk phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the lobby's silence. The caller ID showed room 871. "Front desk, this is Marcus," he answered, trying to keep the tiredness from his voice. "There's someone in the room next to mine." The voice belonged to an elderly woman, clipped and precise despite the late hour. "I'm trying to sleep, but they keep walking back and forth, and humming." Marcus pulled up the occupancy chart. Room 872 was empty, had been for 3 days. Room 874 had a businessman who'd already complained about the weak water pressure. Between them, nothing should exist. "I'm sorry, Mrs." He glanced at the screen. "Pemberton, are you certain the noise is coming from next door?" Sometimes sounds can travel strangely in older buildings. "Young man," her voice turned sharp, "I may be 73, but I'm not senile. I know the difference between sounds from above and sounds from the room that shares my wall. There's someone in there, and they're humming a lullaby. It's been going on for an hour." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He'd been explicitly told during training that any complaints about room 873 should be logged, but not investigated until morning. But Mrs. Pemberton sounded genuinely distressed, and he was the only staff member on duty until 6 a.m. "I'll come up and check it out, Mrs. Pemberton. Give me 5 minutes." He hung up before she could respond, already regretting his promise. The master keyring felt heavier than usual as he lifted it from its hook behind the desk. Each key clinked against its neighbors like tiny bells, a funeral procession of brass and steel. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt interminable. Marcus watched the numbers climb slowly, 4, 5, 6, each floor, marking another step away from the relative safety of the lobby. The elevator car was original to the building. All brass fixtures and dark wood paneling that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Someone had scratched something into the wood near the button panel. He leaned closer to read it. "She's still here." The doors opened with a mechanical groan. The 8th floor hallway stretched before him, lit by fluorescent bulbs that flickered in a pattern that seemed almost like Morse code. The burgundy carpet showed the wear of decades, paths worn down to the backing where countless feet had traveled. But there was one spot, he noticed, where the carpet looked newer, a patch about the size of a doorway, the color slightly brighter, the pile fuller. Right where room 873 should have been. Room 871 was easy to find. Mrs. Pemberton had wedged a towel under her door, presumably to block whatever sounds disturbed her. Marcus could see light seeping from beneath, and he imagined her inside, wide awake and frightened, waiting for help. He stood in the hallway, listening. At first, only the hum of the building's ventilation system reached his ears. Then, gradually, he became aware of another sound. Rhythmic creaking, like someone rocking in an old wooden chair. And beneath that, so faint he almost thought he imagined it humming, a children's lullaby. The notes wavering and distorted, as if heard through water. The sound was coming from the wall between rooms 872 and 874. Marcus ran his hand along the wall where the sound originated. Beneath the cream-colored paint, he could feel the outline of a door frame. Someone had done an excellent job of concealing it, but the edges were there if you knew what to look for. The paint was slightly raised where it had been applied in thick layers, and there was a hairline crack running from floor to ceiling on one side. He pressed his ear against the wall. The humming was clearer now, definitely Rockabye Baby, but sung in a voice that sent ice through his veins. It was a woman's voice, but broken somehow, as if she were singing through a throat full of broken glass. And there was an echo, no, not an echo. A second voice, higher and thinner. A child's voice trying to match the tune, but always slightly off-key. Between 872 and 874, where nothing should exist, he found it. An unmarked door painted the same cream color as the walls. If you weren't looking for it, you'd walk right past. The paint job was masterful, blending the door so perfectly into the wall that it seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, depending on the angle of view. Only the thin outline and the barely visible hinges gave it away. Marcus reached out to touch the door, and immediately pulled his hand back. The surface was cold, not just cool, but actively cold, as if the door were a portal to a walk-in freezer. His breath misted in the air as he leaned closer. There was no room number, no keycard reader, just an old-fashioned keyhole that looked like it belonged in a museum, not a modern hotel. Rust had formed around the edges of the lock, dark brown stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. The master key felt like ice in Marcus's hand as he inserted it into the lock. It didn't fit. He tried the next key, then the next. None of them worked. The keyhole seemed to reject each attempt, as if the lock had been changed, or had never been meant to open from this side. The humming grew louder, and now he could hear other sounds seeping through the door. The splash of water, bare feet on tile, a child's giggle that ended too abruptly, cut off mid-sound like a recording being stopped. She doesn't like strangers. Marcus spun around. Mrs. Pemberton stood in her doorway, clutching a thin robe around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide and glassy, fixed on the unmarked door. "You've heard her before?" Marcus asked. "Every night since I checked in. She sings to the little girl. The little girl cries. Then there's splashing, like someone taking a bath. It goes on for hours." Mrs. Pemberton's voice dropped to a whisper. "Last night, I saw wet footprints in the hallway. Child-sized. They led from that door to the elevator and back, as if in response to her words. The temperature in the hallway plummeted. Their breath came out in visible puffs. The fluorescent lights flickered more urgently. And in the unstable illumination, Marcus could swear he saw the door bulge outward slightly, as if something on the other side was pressing against it. "We should go," he said, but found himself unable to move. The humming had taken on a hypnotic quality, worming its way into his brain. His hand reached for the doorknob without his conscious command. The doorknob was colder than the door itself, so cold it burned. Marcus jerked his hand back, skin already reddening from the brief contact. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it felt like pressure against his eardrums. Then slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Marcus grabbed Mrs. Pemberton's arm. "We need to leave. Now." But she stood transfixed, staring at the door as it creaked open an inch. Through the gap, he glimpsed wallpaper that shouldn't exist, pink roses on yellow backing. A pattern he recognized from the hotel's archived photographs. That wallpaper had been removed during renovations in 1974. A smell wafted through the crack, mildew and copper, and something sweet-sick, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. It was the smell of standing water, of decay, of things that should have dried up long ago, but hadn't. "She wants to play," a voice said from the darkness beyond the door. Not quite a child's voice, not quite an adult's. Something caught between, aging backward and forward simultaneously. "She's been so lonely, so very lonely." A small hand emerged from the darkness, fingers blue-tinged and pruned as if they'd been submerged for hours. Days, years, The fingernails were crescented with what looked like mud or something darker. The hand grasped the door frame, and Marcus saw that the skin was sliding loosely on the bones, like a glove that didn't quite fit. "Play with me," the voice said, and now it was definitely a child's voice, high and plaintive. "Mother says I need a friend. Mother says you'll stay." The door opened wider. Marcus didn't remember running. One moment, he was staring at that terrible small hand. The next, he was hauling Mrs. Pemberton down the stairwell, their feet thundering on concrete steps. Behind them, echoing in the stairwell, came the sound of bare feet slapping on metal wet feet, leaving puddles that splashed with each impact. The humming resumed, but now it was multiple voices, dozens of them, all slightly out of sync, creating a horrible cacophony that reverberated off the walls. "Rockabye Baby," sung by throats that had forgotten how to form proper words, turning the lullaby into something monstrous. They burst through the ground floor exit and into the lobby. Marcus slammed the door behind them and pressed his back against it, chest heaving. The night security guard, dozing at his station, jerked awake. "Call 911, Marcus gasped. But even as he said it, he knew how insane it would sound. What would he report? A ghost? A singing door? Mrs. Pemberton had collapsed into one of the lobby chairs, sobbing quietly. Her bare feet were scraped and bleeding from their flight down the concrete stairs. Marcus grabbed a first aid kit from behind the desk and knelt beside her. "It's okay," he lied. "You're safe now." "No," she whispered. "Nobody's safe. Not as long as that room exists. She told me things while I was trying to sleep, whispered them through the walls. About what happened. About what she did to her little girl. About how they can't leave." The security guard was staring at them both. "What room are you talking about?" Marcus met his eyes. "There is no room. 873. While Mrs. Pemberton composed herself, Marcus retreated to the back office and dove into the hotel's archives. What he found in the yellowed newspapers and faded incident reports made his blood run cold. October 15, 1973. Sarah Chen had checked into room 873 with her 6-year-old daughter, Emily. The desk clerk's notes, written in careful cursive, mentioned bruises on Sarah's arms and the way she flinched when asked for identification. She'd paid in cash for a week's stay, signing the register with a shaking hand. For 3 days, other guests reported nothing unusual. The cleaning staff noted that the room's "Do Not Disturb" sign was never removed. But this wasn't uncommon. It was only when a maintenance worker went to check a reported leak from the room above that the truth was discovered. The police report was clinical in its horror. Sarah had filled the bathtub with scalding water. She'd held Emily under until the struggling stopped. Then, in what the coroner described as a moment of lucid horror at her actions, Sarah had hanged herself from the ceiling fan using sheets twisted into a rope. The bodies had been there for 5 days in the October heat. The smell had finally given them away. But that wasn't the end. Marcus found 3 more reports. The Hendersons, in November 1973, their daughter claimed a wet girl kept trying to climb into bed with her. The Waynes, in January 1974, they fled in the middle of the night after finding their infant's crib filled with bathwater. The Palmers, in March 1974, their daughter Anna was discovered on the 8th floor ledge at 3 a.m., saying, "The little girl told me I could fly." After the Palmer incident, room 873 was officially sealed. Marcus was still reading when the desk phone rang. He glanced at the caller display and his heart stopped. Room 873. With trembling fingers, he picked up the receiver. For a moment, only static greeted him. Then, through the white noise, came the sound of running water. "Hello, Marcus." The voice was Sarah Chen's, exactly as he'd imagined it from the police reports, cultured, soft, with just a trace of desperation underneath. "We've been waiting for you. This isn't possible," he whispered. "Many things aren't possible. A mother's love twisting into something monstrous. A child's trust betrayed in the worst way. Yet here we are." The sound of water grew louder. "Emily wants to meet you. She's been so lonely, you see. The other children who visit, they never stay long. What do you want?" "What every mother wants. For my child to be happy. For my sins to be forgiven. For someone to understand that I never meant. I was trying to save her. From him. From a life of fear and pain. I thought if we went together." The line crackled. When Sarah spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming something ancient and hungry. "But we didn't go anywhere, did we? We're still here. Still in that room. Still in that water. And we'll stay here until someone joins us. Until someone understands." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, then at the security monitors. The camera for the 8th floor showed the hallway, and the door to room 873 standing wide open. Darkness yawning beyond. Marcus knew he should stay at the desk. Every instinct, every shred of common sense screamed at him to remain in the bright, safe lobby. But the image on the security monitor compelled him, that open door, that reaching darkness. If he didn't close it, who would? What might escape into the rest of the hotel? He climbed the stairs again, each step feeling like a year off his life. The stairwell was colder now, and he could see his breath. On the 4th floor landing, he found a puddle of water. On the 6th, wet footprints, one set adult-sized, one child's. They led upward. The 8th floor was transformed. Ice crystals had formed on the walls, and the carpet squished under his feet, saturated with water that seemed to seep from nowhere. The lights had failed completely, except for one at the far end of the hall, which flickered like a dying heartbeat. Room 873's door stood open, but the darkness beyond was absolute, not merely the absence of light, but a hungry void that seemed to pull at him. From within came the sound of a bathtub filling, water splashing over edges that should have rotted away decades ago. As he approached, he saw them. They stood just inside the doorway, mother and daughter, their forms wavering like heat mirages. Sarah Chen wore a floral nightgown that clung to her body, soaked through. Her hair hung in wet ropes around a face that might have been beautiful once. Emily stood beside her in pajamas decorated with dancing bears, the pattern barely visible through the water stains. Both of them dripped constantly, creating puddles that never seemed to grow. "Close the door," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, just close the door." Sarah Chen tilted her head, water streaming from her hair. "But we've been locked in for so long. Don't you think we deserve some fresh air? You're dead. You've been dead for 50 years. Dead," she seemed to taste the word. "Is that what we are?" I still feel Emily's weight in my arms, still feel the water on my hands, still hear her calling for me. She looked down at the child beside her. "Tell the nice man what you want, sweetheart." Emily raised her head. Where her eyes should have been were dark holes that wept brackish water. "I want a friend," she said in a voice like bubbles breaking. "Someone to play with, someone who won't leave." "Everyone leaves," Sarah said sadly. "They check out, they run away, they seal us in. But we're still here, aren't we, baby? Still here in our special room." The temperature dropped further. Marcus's teeth chattered as he forced out words. "What will make you go back? What will make you close the door?" Sarah's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Come inside. Let me show you what happened. Let me show you why we can't leave. Maybe then you'll understand. Maybe then you'll help us." The darkness behind them pulsed like a living thing. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Every cell in his body screamed danger, but his feet took a step forward. "No," the word came from behind Marcus. Mrs. Pemberton stood at the stairwell door, clutching a silver crucifix. "You won't take him like you tried to take me." Sarah's expression darkened. "You were listening, pressing your ear to the wall like a gossip. You heard our private moments. I heard a mother who killed her child. I heard evil, evil." Sarah's voice rose to a shriek that shattered the remaining lights. In the darkness, she glowed with a pale phosphorescence. Evil was the man who broke my ribs. Evil was watching him look at Emily the way he looked at me. Evil was knowing what would happen when she got older. I saved her. Emily began to cry, a sound like water gurgling down a drain. "Mama, you're scaring me. SHH, baby. Mama's here. Mama will always be here." Sarah stroked the child's wet hair. "That's why we can't leave, you see. We're bound by love, by guilt, by the water that won't drain and the rope that won't break. We're a mother and daughter together forever." Mrs. Pemberton stepped forward, holding her crucifix high. "Then be together, but be together somewhere else. This is a place for the living." The hallway shook. Doors all along the corridor flew open and slammed shut. From each room came sounds, crying, screaming, water running. Every guest who'd ever stayed in room 873, Marcus realized, every echo of terror the room had absorbed. The chaos crescendoed. Water poured from beneath every door, flooding the hallway ankle deep. The walls cracked, revealing glimpses of room 873 as it had been pink and yellow wallpaper. A child's drawings taped to the walls. A bathtub perpetually overflowing. Marcus grabbed Mrs. Pemberton. "We have to go," but Sarah Chen stepped out of the doorway, and with her movement, the water rose. Knee-deep now, ice cold, with things floating in it that Marcus didn't want to identify. Emily clung to her mother's nightgown, sobbing those terrible, liquid sobs. "You can't leave," Sarah said. "No one leaves room 873. We learned that the hard way." The water reached Marcus's waist. His legs were going numb. Beside him, Mrs. Pemberton struggled to stay upright. Her crucifix slipped from her frozen fingers and disappeared beneath the surface. Then Marcus remembered something from the police report. Something about Sarah's husband. "He never found you, did he?" Sarah froze. The water stopped rising. "Your husband, he never found you here. You kept Emily safe. You did what you set out to do." The ghost's eyes, suddenly visible, suddenly human, filled with tears that mixed with the water constantly streaming down her face. "Safe," she whispered. "She died afraid." Mrs. Pemberton snapped through chattering teeth, but Marcus pressed on. "She died in her mother's arms, not in his hands, not after years of abuse. You saved her from that." Emily looked up at her mother. "Did you save me, Mama?" The question hung in the frozen air. Sarah Chen collapsed to her knees in the water, pulling Emily close. For the first time in 50 years, the constant dripping stopped. Mother and daughter held each other in the flooded hallway, and for a moment, they looked alive. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered to her daughter. "I'm so sorry, I thought it was the only way." "I know, Mama." Emily's voice was clear now, no longer waterlogged. "I was scared, but you were there. You were always there." The water began to recede, draining through impossible cracks in the floor. As it lowered, Marcus saw that Sarah and Emily were fading too, becoming translucent. "We can go now," Emily said, wonder in her voice. "Look, Mama, there's a door, a different door." Marcus and Mrs. Pemberton saw nothing, but Sarah's face lit up with something like joy. "Yes, baby, I see it. It's beautiful." Hand in hand, mother and daughter walked back toward room 873, but as they reached the threshold, they turned back. "Thank you," Sarah said, "for seeing me as more than a monster, for remembering that I was a mother first." "Will the room be safe now?" Marcus asked. Sarah's smile was sad. "There is no room 873. There never was. Just a mother's guilt and a child's loneliness, given form by fear and fed by silence. But now," she looked down at Emily, "now we can rest." They stepped through the doorway and vanished. The door swung shut with a click that sounded like a sigh. The 8th floor returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after what had happened. The carpet was dry, the lights steady. Where the door to room 873 had been, only a smooth wall remained. Not even a seam showed where it had been painted over. Marcus and Mrs. Pemberton stood shivering in the hallway, soaked despite the dry carpet. They looked at each other, sharing a moment of understanding that needed no words. "We should go," Marcus said finally. "You need dry clothes, and I need to," he trailed off. What was there to do? File a report. Call management. "You need to quit," Mrs. Pemberton said firmly. "Tonight, this place, it's not just room 873. Can't you feel it? The whole hotel is sick with secrets." As if in response, they heard it faint but unmistakable. From somewhere far below, perhaps from the abandoned floors that predated the hotel's last renovation, came the sound of jazz music, the kind that had played in the speakeasy that once occupied the basement. The kind that had played the night 3 men died in a bootlegging dispute, their bodies hidden in the walls. Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right. We should both leave." They took the stairs down together, each floor revealing hints of the hotel's dark history. The 5th floor, where a senator had committed suicide in 1934. The 3rd floor, where a fire in 1961 had trapped a wedding party. The 2nd floor, where something scratched inside the walls at night. The Grand Bellmore Hotel was more than old. It was a repository of tragedies, each one leaving its mark, its echo, its hunger for recognition. In the lobby, Marcus went straight to the manager's office and typed out his resignation, effective immediately. Mrs. Pemberton waited, having already decided never to set foot in the hotel again. The security guard watched them both with confused concern. As Marcus gathered his personal belongings, the computer at the front desk chimed. A new reservation had come through. His blood ran cold when he saw the name, Sarah Chen, traveling with 1 child. But when he clicked on the details, the reservation vanished. The system showed no record of it. He refreshed the page, nothing. It was as if the hotel's computer had hiccuped, showing him a ghost of data that no longer existed. "They're really gone," he said, more to himself than to Mrs. Pemberton. "From here, maybe." She pulled her coat tighter. "But there are other hotels, other rooms that don't exist, other mothers who made terrible choices, other children who never got to grow up." Marcus printed out his resignation and left it on the manager's desk. As they walked toward the exit, he noticed something he'd never seen before: a plaque near the door, listing the hotel's historic designations. At the bottom, in small text, was a line that made his skin crawl. "Built on the site of the Bellmore Sanatorium, 1847 to 1891. Dedicated to the treatment of hysteria and melancholia in women and children." He pushed through the revolving door and into the Philadelphia night, leaving the Grand Bellmore Hotel and its accumulated sorrows behind. 3 months later, Marcus was working at a small bed and breakfast in the suburbs when he saw the news report. The Grand Bellmore Hotel was closing for extensive renovations. The real story, buried in the local paper's back pages, was more disturbing. A family of 4 had fled in the middle of the night, reporting impossible things in their suite. A bellhop had been found catatonic in the basement, muttering about the speakeasy ghosts. Most damning, a building inspector had discovered that an entire floor, the 13th, supposedly removed during construction, still existed, walled off and forgotten, filled with furniture from the 1920s, and the remains of guests who'd checked in but never checked out. The article included a photo of the hotel's exterior. Marcus studied it carefully and felt his heart stop. In an 8th floor window, where room 873 would have been, 2 figures were visible. Just shadows, really, tricks of light and reflection. But he knew better. He thought about calling someone, warning them. But who would believe him? And more importantly, what could anyone do? The Grand Bellmore Hotel was what it had always been, a container for the city's dark history, a place where the past refused to stay buried. That night, he dreamed of water, of a mother's lullaby echoing through empty halls, of a little girl who would never grow up, forever 6 years old, forever waiting for a friend to play with. He woke to find his sheets soaked with water that smelled of mildew and old flowers. On his nightstand, written in condensation on a glass he didn't remember filling, "We miss you." Marcus moved out of state the next week. The Grand Bellmore Hotel never reopened. The renovation crew discovered too many things that couldn't be explained: rooms that changed size overnight, hallways that led to different floors than they should, elevator shafts that went deeper than the building's foundation. The 13th floor, when they finally broke through the walls, contained a fully functional hotel frozen in the 1920s, complete with guests who crumbled to dust when exposed to air. The city tried to demolish it. The first wrecking ball cracked on impact. The second swung back and destroyed the crane. On the third attempt, every construction worker reported the same thing: children's voices, singing from inside the building, singing lullabies. So the Grand Bellmore stands empty now, a hollow tooth in Philadelphia's skyline. Urban explorers occasionally break in, though few make it past the lobby. Those who do report water damage throughout the building, no matter how dry the weather. They speak of doors that open onto impossible rooms, of elevators that take you to floors that don't exist, of a constant sound of dripping that follows you everywhere. And on the 8th floor, they say, there's a wall where a door should be. If you press your ear against it, you can hear them, a mother and daughter, singing together. Not trapped anymore, perhaps, but not gone either. Waiting in the space between what was and what should never have been. The city has given up. They've simply removed it from maps, hoping people will forget. But at night, lights flicker in the windows. Shadows move. And sometimes, on foggy October nights, you can see her, Sarah Chen, standing in the window of room 873, holding her daughter, looking out at a world that's moved on without them, still checking in, still never checking out.